gentlemen, welcome back to another Blackout Fridays, and today we have a special edition. We're going to call it the Strong Black Woman Edition. Today we're coming to you speaking about Ida B. Wells, one of the strongest black women in history, who is not very well known. So let's learn about her. Miss Wells was born July 16, 1862. Few years before slavery ended, and she was born in Holly Springs, Mississippi. In her younger years, she found tragedy very soon. In 1878, there was a yellow fever pandemic, and the pandemic swept through, taking out her father, her mother, and one of her younger siblings. After that, it left her in a hard position because she still had younger siblings. Nobody wanted to care for all of the children. There was like 5 altogether, including Ida. So instead of allowing the family to split up the kids, Ida decided to take responsibility with a little help from her grandmother. And she stepped up. She became a teacher. She started teaching in Mississippi. That was the beginning of her career. She made her move to Memphis, Tennessee in 1883, where she started teaching. And then a year later, in 1884, she met her first run-in with racial discrimination. She was riding the women's coach train, and as she's on the train, the conductor comes by, asks her for a ticket, takes her ticket, then hands it back to her and says, "I'm gonna need you to move to the other car." The other car being a smoking car and quite full at the time. Ida, being on the woman's car, decides not to move. They drag her off of the train, kicking and screaming, in which, of course, she's trying to take out as many of them as she can. But now, after being dragged off the train, she goes, gets a lawyer, sues the railroad company. In the lower state courts of Tennessee, she wins. She's rewarded $500 for damages. But the railroad company is not having it, and they appeal. In the Supreme Court of Tennessee, they overturned the earlier ruling. She lost in the Supreme Court. Big surprise, right? She was also quoted saying that she felt that her suit was going to bring great things for her people. After losing her Supreme Court trial, this is what propelled her towards journalism to a degree. She started writing about her case, writing about what happened to her, how unfair it was. To add on top of that, a good friend of hers named Thomas Moss ends up in a terrible situation. A man named Thomas Moss, who is great friends with Ida B. Wells, owned a African-American grocery store called the People's Grocery. Now, one day, there was some little boys playing outside the store, black and white kids. 2 little boys, the black and the white boy, they're playing marbles. They get in an argument over the game. They start a fight. Now, the little boys are fighting. The white boy's father sees it and jumps in. He proceeds to thrash on the little black boy, which allegedly 2 employees from the People's Grocery, they rush out to help the young black boy. What pursues next is an all-out racially charged mob riot situation. The next day after that situation, the owner of the white grocery store complains to the sheriff deputy. After complaining to the sheriff deputy, they go to approach the black grocery store in mob fashion. The black men being notified of a mob coming their way, them being on edge, they start firing shots. before the white people approached. The shots being fired hit 2 individuals, 1 deputy and 1 innocent bystander. This brought about a heavy recruiting into the Memphis Police Department of white people. A heavy amount of white people were deputized. After being deputized, the goal was then very clear: destroy the African American riot, the African American rebellion that is stemming from Thomas Moss grocery store. Nevertheless, on March 9th of 1892, after arresting McDowell, Stewart, and Moss, they were very, very soon ripped from their cells by a mob of men, 75 deep. These men dragged them away from the jailhouse, pulling them miles down the road to where they take them to a location where they deliver their own form of vigilante justice, which goes by the name of lynching. This is what started Ida B. Wells down her true calling of speaking out against lynching and speaking on the true reason and why white men lynched black men. Therefore, she was threatened. The Free Speech and Headlight newspaper that she wrote was burned down because of the articles that she published. She published articles speaking about the truth behind lynching, which was not black men raping white women, but black men's economic progress. That infuriated the white population of Memphis, running Ida B. Wells out of the city, where she still continued to speak out about anti-lynching. She spoke out about it in her Southern Horrors pamphlet. She also spoke out about it in 1895 in The Red Record, which was another pamphlet that spoke on lynching and the dark secrets of it. Things that nobody in her time was speaking of. Things that nobody dared to speak about. She spoke on those things and received great backlash from many people. Her main supporter, one of her only supporters, all the way up until 1895 when he passed, was Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass supported Ida B. Wells and everything she spoke on. Ida B. Wells was shunned in America. The white audience didn't want to hear her. The black audience didn't give her a chance, being that at that time, it wasn't normal for a woman to be a leader in any civil rights movement. So it was hard for her to find her spot. But despite all of the naysayers, she refused to give up. She found crowds of white folks to speak her anti-lynching rhetoric to when she made her travels to Britain in 1893 and again in 1894. She was also a founding member of the NAACP, but did not receive the same credit as other founding members. She was considered a very radical individual, but I will tell you what, Ida B. Wells was one of the strongest black women in our history, and she had one of the strongest messages today. So today, we salute Ida B. Wells and thank her for being a part of our Black history. And that's all I have today for Blackout Fridays. Please like, share, and subscribe, and make sure you make your way back for the next episode.